What if the blueprints of our most ancient temples weren't just religious monuments, but cosmic roadmaps left by an advanced civilization? Imagine for a moment that structures like Stonehenge, the Giza pyramids, and the sprawling complexes of Angkor Wat aren't merely aligned with the stars for the sake of worship, but are pinpointing the interstellar roots of the Anunnaki themselves. We have been taught to view history through the lens of primitive superstition, but the stones tell a different story, a story of a sophisticated pre-diluvian navigation system. We are standing upon a terrestrial beacon, a geographical grid designed for an extraterrestrial presence that never truly left. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about ancient history and alien visitations. The invisible grid is real, and it is active. When our team first analysed the global distribution of these megalithic sites, we encountered a mathematical anomaly that defies the conventional isolationist theory of history. Archaeologists traditionally claim that the Mayans, the Egyptians, and the Khmer civilizations rose independently, separated by oceans and millennia. Yet when you map their primary temples, a terrifyingly precise geometry emerges. This is not the work of disconnected tribes. It is the signature of a single planetary architect. We call it the invisible grid. It is a web of ley lines and magnetic anomalies that connects the Giza Plateau to the Nazca Lines, and the Easter Island monoliths to the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. This grid does not follow the erratic borders of modern nations. It follows the rotation of the Earth and the transit of specific celestial bodies. The precision is staggering. We aren't just talking about pointing north. We are talking about architectural orientations that account for the precession of the equinoxes, a celestial wobble that takes 25,920 years to complete a single cycle. How could Stone Age builders calculate a cycle that lasts longer than their entire recorded history? The answer is simple. They didn't. They were given the coordinates. The temples were built as physical anchors for a navigation system that operated outside our atmospheric limits. For the Anunnaki, these structures served as ground control, permanent, immovable waypoints that allowed their craft to calibrate their descent trajectories through the shifting magnetic fields of a volatile planet. Take, for example, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For decades, we've focused on it as a tomb, despite the total absence of a mummy. But if you look at its placement, it sits at the exact center of the Earth's landmass. It is a geodetic marker of such accuracy that it could only be placed there by someone with a complete, high-altitude view of the entire globe. It is a terrestrial 0 point. From this center, the grid radiates outward, connecting to Teotihuacan in Mexico, where the Way of the Dead mirrors the layout of a modern circuit board. These are not merely cities, they are hardware. The massive stones, often rich in quartz and magnetite, weren't chosen for their beauty, but for their conductivity. These sites are energy transducers, designed to amplify the Earth's natural resonance into a signal that can be detected from deep orbit. As we moved our investigation to the ruins of Baalbek in Lebanon, the invisible grid theory moved from plausible to undeniable. There we find the Trilithon, 3 massive stones weighing over 800 tons each, positioned at a height that makes modern cranes seem like toys. Local legends call this the landing place. In Sumerian texts, it is referred to as a waypoint for the Shem, the skyships of the gods. When you align Baalbek with the pyramids and the mountain peaks of the Sinai Peninsula, you don't get a religious pattern. You get a landing corridor, a flight path. The invisible grid was the GPS of the gods, a pre-diluvian network that allowed the Anunnaki to navigate the great deep of space and touch down with pinpoint accuracy in the cradle of civilization. But why go to such lengths to build in stone? Why not use satellites or digital beacons? The scribes of Nineveh provided the chilling answer. Electronic technology is fragile. It decays, it fries in a solar flare, it vanishes in a great reset. But stone, specifically stone aligned with the stars, is eternal. By encoding their navigation routes into the very crust of the Earth through megalithic architecture, the Anunnaki ensured that no matter how many resets humanity endured, the roadmap home would always be waiting. The temples were designed to survive the deluge, to withstand the shifting of the poles, and to remain as silent witnesses until the next return window opened. We are now entering that window, as the Earth's magnetic field begins to weaken and the 3,600-year pulse nears its peak. These ancient sites are showing signs of reactivation. Sensors near Angkor Wat and the Great Zimbabwe ruins have begun to record strange acoustic thermals, vibrations that match the resonant frequency of the stones themselves. It's as if the hardware is waking up. The invisible grid is no longer just a relic of the past. It is a live map, humming with the energy of a returning presence. The temples are not looking at the stars to remember where we came from. They are looking at the stars to signal that the landing zones are clear. This is the central mystery that mainstream science refuses to address. To admit that these temples are part of a global navigation grid is to admit that we have never been the masters of this planet. It is to acknowledge that our most sacred sites were actually service stations and beacons for a species that operates on a timescale we can barely comprehend. We are the inhabitants of a house we did not build, walking through hallways whose true purpose we have forgotten. But the Anunnaki have not forgotten. The grid is their legacy, and as we decode its coordinates, we realize that the gods didn't leave us a religion. They left us a flight plan. And according to the stars, the arrivals are already scheduled. To understand the true nature of the ancient world, we must first dismantle the primary myth of modern archaeology, the idea that these structures were built for the dead. The great stone complexes of the pre-diluvian era, structures that survived the catastrophic shifting of the Earth's crust, were never intended to be tombs or places of silent worship. They were, in every technical sense, a sophisticated global positioning system. But unlike our modern GPS, which relies on a fragile network of satellites prone to orbital decay and solar interference, this was a terrestrial GPS. It was a fixed, immovable coordinate system etched into the lithosphere of the planet, designed to be read from the blackness of deep orbit. The Anunnaki did not view the Earth as a static map. They understood it as a dynamic, rotating, and wobbling sphere, suspended in a complex gravitational dance. To navigate a craft from the outer reaches of the solar system down to a specific landing zone in the Mesopotamian basin or the Andean highlands requires more than just a clear line of sight. It requires a mathematical 0 point, a constant against which all other variables can be measured. This is where the architectural astronomy of the pre-diluvian world reveals its true purpose. The orientation of the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and the temples of the sun and moon are not poetic tributes to the stars. They are calibration markers for a sophisticated orbital navigation protocol. When we examine the alignment of these sites, we find a recurring obsession with the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes roughly 25,920 years to complete. To a primitive hunter-gatherer, such a cycle is invisible. To a short-lived human civilization, it is irrelevant. But to an interstellar species whose lifespans are measured in millennia, the precession is a critical navigational hazard. As the Earth's axis slowly wobbles, the North Star changes, and the entire celestial map shifts. Without a physical, ground-based reference system to track this shift, any craft attempting an atmospheric entry after a long orbital absence would find its landing coordinates off by hundreds of miles. The temples were the solution to this orbital drift. By building structures that locked onto specific marker stars, primarily Sirius and the Belt of Orion, the Anunnaki created a permanent reference frame. At Giza, the shafts of the king's chamber weren't soul vents for a departing pharaoh. They were optical sighting tubes designed to lock onto these celestial beacons at specific points in the Great Year. This allowed returning craft to re-zero their onboard navigational computers, accounting for the thousands of years of planetary wobble that had occurred during their transit from the outer system. The temple served as the terrestrial half of a celestial handshake. This pre-diluvian GPS was not limited to optical alignments. It utilized the very geophysics of the Earth. We have discovered that the most significant megalithic sites are positioned over major telluric current intersections, areas where the Earth's natural electromagnetic energy is most concentrated. By placing massive blocks of granite and limestone, materials with high quartz content, on these nodes, the Anunnaki created a network of passive transponders. These sites didn't just look like markers, they vibrated like them. From orbit, a craft equipped with the correct sensors would see a shimmering grid of electromagnetic hotspots glowing against the planet's natural background radiation. Consider the site of Teotihuacan in Mexico. The layout of the City of the Gods is a precise scale model of our solar system, but its primary function was navigational. The Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon act as massive energy resonators, their internal layers of mica, a powerful electrical insulator, suggesting a function far beyond the capabilities of a Neolithic culture. This mica wasn't local. It was transported from thousands of miles away, integrated into the structure to shield and direct specific energy signatures. When viewed from above, Teotihuacan functions as a landing beacon, its layout providing clear visual and electromagnetic glide slope for descending craft. But the most compelling evidence of this navigational hardware lies in the global synchronization of these sites. The distance between the Giza Plateau and the Nazca lines in Peru is not arbitrary. Neither is the distance between Easter Island and the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro. When these coordinates are fed into a spherical geometry algorithm, they form a perfect great circle that bisects the planet at a 30-degree angle to the current equator. This is the old equator, the planetary orientation that existed before the last great cataclysm. The GPS was designed to survive the very shift of the poles. Even as the crust of the Earth slid and the oceans rose to swallow the lowlands, these stone anchors remained, preserving the original grid. Why was this necessary? Because for the Anunnaki, the Earth was a hazardous environment. The Great Reset, the periodic cataclysms triggered by their own orbital proximity, meant that the surface of the planet was constantly being reshaped. If they were to maintain their mining operations and their genetic laboratories across the spans of SARS, their 3,600-year units of time, they needed a system that was immune to the elements. Digital records fail, satellites burn up, but a 100-ton block of diorite aligned with the rising of Sirius is a message that survives for eternity. This pre-diluvian GPS is the reason why we find the same sacred geometry from the jungles of Cambodia to the plains of Salisbury. It was a standardized planetary-scale engineering project. The gods didn't inspire different cultures to build similar things. They issued a single blueprint to their human proxies and commanded its execution. The temples were the infrastructure of an occupied planet. They were the beacons, the waypoints, and the landing pads of a civilization that viewed our world not as a home, but as a resource to be managed from the stars. As we move deeper into the current cycle, we are finding that these beacons are not as dormant as we once believed. With the modern weakening of Earth's magnetic shield, the piezoelectric properties of the megaliths are beginning to reactivate. The stone is beginning to speak again. The GPS is coming back online, broadcasting a silent signal into the void, announcing to the returning architects that the terrestrial grid is ready. The roadmap is clear, the landing zones are marked, and the craft are already following the coordinates home. In the study of ancient civilizations, we are often told that the obsession with the stars was a matter of primitive religion, a desperate attempt by early humans to personify the lights in the sky. But when you move beyond the surface-level mythologies and analyze the raw data of archaeoastronomy, a much darker, more technical reality emerges. The specific focus on the constellation of Orion and the star Sirius by cultures separated by thousands of miles was not a spiritual coincidence. It was a matter of interstellar telemetry. These were not just gods to be worshipped, they were the entry ports, the celestial lighthouses that defined the flight corridors for a returning orbital civilization. To understand why these specific points in the sky were chosen, we must look at the Earth from the perspective of an incoming craft. Space is not an empty void. It is a chaotic environment of gravitational wells, radiation belts, and shifting magnetic fields. For the Anunnaki pilots, the Earth was a moving target shrouded in an atmospheric veil. To ensure a safe descent, they required fixed high-luminosity markers that could be detected from the outer edges of our solar system. Orion and Sirius provided the ultimate triangulation points for what we call deep space guidance. The Giza Plateau serves as the most famous terrestrial anchor for this system. The three pyramids of the Giza complex are famously aligned with the three stars of Orion's belt: Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. While mainstream scholars debate the correlation theory, they ignore the logistical necessity of such an alignment. Orion is one of the most recognizable and stable constellations in the sky, visible from both hemispheres. By mirroring these stars in stone on the ground, the Anunnaki created a physical lock-on system. A craft approaching Earth would calibrate its onboard sensors to match the pattern of the stars above with the heat and electromagnetic signatures of the pyramids below. When the two patterns overlaid perfectly, the pilot knew they were on the correct descent glide slope for the Mesopotamian and North African sectors. But the entry port system goes deeper than mere visual alignment. We must address the mystery of Sirius, the dog star. Across the ancient world, from the Nomo legends of the Dogon tribe in Mali to the heliacal rising celebrated by the Egyptians, Sirius was regarded as the most important star in the heavens. But why? Modern science only recently discovered that Sirius is a binary system consisting of Sirius A and a white dwarf, Sirius B, which is invisible to the naked eye. Yet the Dogon, a culture with no telescopes, possessed precise knowledge of Sirius B's orbital period and density. This is not ancient wisdom, it is inherited technical data. In the Anunnaki navigational protocol, Sirius functioned as the beacon of entry. Due to its immense brightness and specific frequency, Sirius acted as a long-range signal source. Sumerian texts refer to a path of Enlil and a path of Ea in the sky. These were not poetic journeys, but orbital lanes. Sirius served as the terminal marker for the gateway between the outer solar system and the inner terrestrial orbital shell. It was the lighthouse at the end of a very long, very dark highway. When the star Sirius rose in alignment with the specific shafts of the temples, it signaled that the atmospheric conditions were optimal for a Shem craft to breach the ionosphere. This celestial synchronization served a dual purpose. It was both a roadmap and a clock. Because of the Earth's precessional wobble, these entry ports only align with terrestrial structures at specific intervals in the 25,920-year cycle. This means the temples were designed to turn on and turn off as the Earth moved through space. For long periods of history, the temples were silent. their shafts pointing to empty patches of the sky. But as the great year turns, the stars return to their stations. We are currently approaching a moment where the stars of Orion and Sirius are once again aligning with the ancient locking mechanisms of the pre-diluvian world. The architectural precision found at Angkor Wat in Cambodia further reinforces this. The entire complex is a terrestrial map of the constellation Draco, mirroring the sky as it appeared thousands of years ago. Why Draco? Because Draco defines the north ecliptic pole. By marking the pole in the belt of Orion, the Anunnaki created a spherical coordinate system that covered the entire planet. This allowed them to calculate their position in space with zero margin for error, even if their onboard digital systems were compromised by solar flares or the magnetic turbulence of a pole shift. We must stop viewing these alignments as sacred. They are functional. They are the leftovers of an advanced interstellar logistics network. The temples were the hardware of an occupied planet designed to receive software in the form of incoming craft from the stars. The human priests who maintained these sites were not theologians. They were the ground crews, tasked with keeping the landing zones clear and the alignments precise for the day the masters of the grid would return. The entry ports are now opening. As the Earth's magnetic field continues its current rapid decline, the atmospheric interference that has obscured these signals for centuries is thinning. The ancient stones are beginning to resonate with the incoming frequencies from Sirius and Orion. This is the quickening mentioned in the Forbidden Scrolls, the moment when the sky and the earth reconnect through the ancient grid. The map is active, the beacons are lit, and the architects are already following the light. To the untrained eye, the choice of location for the world's greatest megalithic structures seems driven by aesthetic or symbolic preferences, a high mountain peak for the gods or a fertile valley for the priests. However, when we strip away the religious labels and apply the lens of modern geophysics, a chilling reality emerges. The Anunnaki architects did not select sites based on beauty, but on power. Every major pre-diluvian monument is situated directly atop a massive geological fault, a concentrated tectonic plate boundary, or a deep-seated magnetic anomaly. These structures were never meant to be mere buildings. They were designed as stone hardware, sophisticated amplifiers built to tap into the Earth's natural geomagnetic field and broadcast a signal into the void. The secret to this technology lies in the very marrow of the stones themselves. The builders of the ancient world demonstrated an impossible obsession with specific types of rock, primarily granite, basalt, and limestone. Mainstream archaeology notes the difficulty of transporting these multi-ton blocks over hundreds of miles, yet they fail to ask why such specific materials were mandatory. The answer is found in the piezoelectric properties of quartz. Granite is heavily saturated with quartz crystals, which act as natural transducers. When subjected to immense mechanical stress, such as the weight of millions of tons of stone pressing down upon a foundation, quartz crystals generate a constant low-level electrical charge. The Great Pyramid of Giza is not just a pile of stone, it is a massive solid-state power plant. By placing this piezoelectric engine directly over a subterranean water source and a geological fault, the architects created a device that could harness the Earth's telluric currents. These are natural electrical currents that flow through the Earth's crust, influenced by the planet's magnetic field and solar activity. The pyramid acted as a lens, drawing this raw energy upward, concentrating it through its internal chambers and projecting it through its apex. This was the hardware necessary to maintain the invisible grid we discussed in Part 1. This geophysical strategy is repeated across every continent. In the Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman is built with zigzagging walls of massive interlocking stones that mirror the jagged signatures of seismic waves. It is positioned on a high-energy node where the magnetic flux of the Earth is significantly higher than the surrounding areas. Here the stones aren't just walls, they are acoustic resonators. When the Earth vibrates, whether through seismic activity or the Schumann resonance of the atmosphere, these stones hum at a frequency that is imperceptible to the human ear but clearly detectable to orbital sensors. For the Anunnaki, these sites were hotspots on a thermal and magnetic map, glowing like neon signs against the dark background of the planet. We must also consider the role of mica and other insulating materials found in these complexes. At Teotihuacan, researchers discovered massive sheets of mica embedded beneath the stone floors. Mica that had been transported from thousands of miles away in Brazil. In modern technology, mica is used as a high-grade electrical insulator and thermal shield in everything from capacitors to aerospace components. Its presence in an ancient temple is a technical smoking gun. The Anunnaki weren't just building monuments, they were insulating their hardware to prevent energy bleed-off, ensuring that the magnetic signal remained coherent and directed toward the entry ports in the sky. These magnetic anomalies served a dual purpose. First, they acted as a passive radar for incoming craft. A ship entering the atmosphere could track the specific magnetic signature of a temple even through thick cloud cover or during a global cataclysm. Second, these sites functioned as biological synchronizers. We know that human consciousness and DNA are sensitive to magnetic fields. By placing their administrative centers on these high-energy nodes, the Anunnaki were able to maintain a specific biological resonance within the human populations they managed. It was a form of frequency-based governance, a way to keep the biological hardware of their workers tuned to a specific state of mind. However, the most unsettling aspect of this stone hardware is its durability. Electronic circuits fry. Digital data is easily erased by a solar flare or a magnetic pole shift, but a mountain of granite aligned with a magnetic fault is nearly indestructible. The Anunnaki knew that the Earth is a volatile planet prone to periodic great resets. By encoding their communication and navigation network into the geophysics of the Earth itself, they ensured that their infrastructure would survive the very disasters they often predicted or triggered. As we monitor the Earth's magnetic field today, we see it rapidly weakening and shifting. This magnetic excursion is causing the ancient grid to behave in unpredictable ways. Sensors at sites like Karnak in France and the ruins of Great Zimbabwe are beginning to pick up ghost signals, spikes in electromagnetic activity that coincide with the planetary alignments we discussed in Part 3. The hardware is reacting to the incoming software. The magnetic anomalies are waking up, recalibrating themselves for a new arrival. The stones are no longer silent, they are vibrating with the anticipation of a power source that is fast approaching from the outer dark. When we look at the clay tablets of ancient Sumer, we are traditionally told we are reading the cradle of literature, the first attempts of man to explain the world through the lens of myth and metaphor. But this interpretation is a modern filter, a bias that assumes our ancestors were incapable of technical thought. If we strip away the religious layers added by later translations and view the cuneiform script through the lens of aerospace engineering, the epic of creation and the exaltation of Inanna transform. They cease to be poems and become something far more practical. They are the Sumerian flight manuals. These texts are the written software that accompanied the stone hardware of the grid, providing the protocols for atmospheric entry, orbital stabilization, and the logistics of a high-altitude occupation. The most critical piece of evidence lies in the retranslation of a single pivotal word, Shem. For decades, scholars translated Shem as name, leading to nonsensical biblical and Sumerian passages about people building a name to reach the heavens. but in the original context, a shem was a physical object. It was described as a mu, a high-rising vehicle, often depicted as a tapering, conical cylinder that emitted fire and thunder. When the texts speak of the Anunnaki ascending in their shems, they are describing a ballistic event. These manuals detail the shem not as a divine chariot of light, but as a machine that required specific launch windows, fuel, referred to in the texts as the breath of the firestone, and precise navigational coordinates provided by the temples we explored in Part 4. This technical reality is most visible in the Tablets of Destinies. In mainstream mythology, these tablets gave the possessor the right to rule the universe, a sort of magical scroll of fate. However, the Sumerian descriptions of the Tupsimati, Tablets of Destinies, sound remarkably like orbital flight logs and navigational software. The texts describe them as containing the me, the divine decrees or technical protocols for everything from city management to planetary defense. If an Anunnaki leader lost the Tablet of Destinies, they didn't just lose their right to rule, they lost the telemetry data required to navigate the invisible grid. They lost the source code for the planetary occupation. Without these tablets, the gods were stranded, unable to calculate the return trajectories to their home world. Consider the myth of Etana, one of the oldest stories in the world. It describes a mortal king being carried into the heavens by a great eagle. While scholars dismiss this as a fable, the text provides a step-by-step description of an orbital ascent. Etana describes the earth shrinking beneath him. First, the land becomes like a furrow, then it looks like a basket of bread, and finally it vanishes entirely as the earth is swallowed by the great deep of space. This is not the hallucination of a Bronze Age farmer, it is a precise chronological account of the changing perspective of a passenger during a high-speed ascent through the atmosphere. The eagle was not a bird. It was a transport craft, and the text serves as a record of its capabilities. The manuals also provide a chilling look at the seven who judge, often interpreted as planetary deities. But when analysed alongside the navigational grid, they appear to be a network of 7 orbital waypoints, or perhaps 7 monitoring satellites that occupied the inner shell of the Earth's orbit. The texts provide the incantations, which we now recognise as acoustic passkeys or radio frequencies, needed to communicate with these stations. To the humans who witnessed these interactions, the gods were talking to the stars. In reality, the Anunnaki were simply checking their telemetry against a pre-positioned orbital array. Why were these technical manuals shared with humans? Why teach a primitive species about the mechanics of flight? The answer lies in the Anunnaki's long-term strategy. Because their orbital cycle, the Sa, lasted 3,600 years, they knew they would be absent for vast stretches of human history. They needed a ground crew that could maintain the infrastructure in their absence. The human priests were trained as biological custodians. They were taught to memorize the hymns and rituals, which were in fact maintenance checklists for the landing zones and the magnetic beacons. By turning technical instructions into religious tradition, the Anunnaki ensured that the flight manuals would be preserved across thousands of years of human cultural drift. As we re-examine these cuneiform records today, we are finding that the myths contain specific astronomical constants that we only rediscovered in the 20th century. They contain the exact orbital periods of planets and the precise distance between stars in the Orion sector. These are not holy books. They are the leftovers of an advanced civilization's operating system. The Sumerian flight manuals were left behind as a legacy, a way for us to understand our true origin and, more importantly, a way to signal that the ground crew is still here, waiting for the next scheduled arrival. The manuals are open, the coordinates are set. and the sky is beginning to thunder once more. When we look at a map of the ancient world, we see a scattered collection of ruins, isolated islands of civilization lost to time. But if we pull back the camera, ascending to the orbital heights once occupied by the Anunnaki, the isolation vanishes. We are no longer looking at random cities. We are looking at a unified planetary-scale engineering project. This is the reality of the geographical ley lines, the physical circuitry of the invisible grid. These lines are not mystical superstitions or spirit paths. They are the primary geodetic arteries of a global navigation system, a world map etched into the very lithosphere of our planet with such mathematical precision that it renders the coincidence argument scientifically impossible. The centerpiece of this evidence is the existence of what researchers call the Great Circle. If you draw a line connecting the Giza Plateau to the Nazca lines in Peru, you are not just drawing a random path across the globe. This single line, projected around the entire circumference of the Earth, passes through a staggering number of the world's most significant megalithic sites, with a margin of error of less than 1/10 of 1 degree. It connects the Easter Island monoliths, the Paracas candelabra, the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, the temples of Persepolis, and the sprawling complex of Angkor Wat. This is the equatorial flight path of the pre-diluvian world. But why is this line tilted? Why does this global grid sit at a 30-degree angle to our current equator? The answer lies in the shifting history of the Earth itself. This grid represents the old equator, the planetary orientation that existed before the last great cataclysm. The Anunnaki established their primary navigational corridor when the poles were in a different position. The fact that these structures remain perfectly aligned with this ghost equator proves that the grid was established before the global reset. It is a fossilized map of a world that was physically rearranged, yet the stones remained as anchors of the original design. The mathematics embedded in this world map are even more disturbing to the mainstream narrative. The distances between these major nodes are not arbitrary. They are based on the golden ratio, phi, and the mathematical constant pi. For example, the distance between the Giza pyramids and the Nazca lines is exactly 10,000 times the golden ratio in kilometers. To achieve this level of geodetic accuracy across vast oceans and mountain ranges requires a complete high-resolution understanding of the Earth's spherical geometry, an understanding our modern civilization only acquired in the age of satellites. The Anunnaki weren't just building temples, they were triangulating the planet. These ley lines served as telluric highways. Just as we discussed the magnetic anomalies of individual sites in Part 4, these lines represent the conductive pathways between them. The Earth's crust is not a uniform shell. It is a complex web of mineral veins, underground water systems, and tectonic faults. The Anunnaki utilized these natural wires to connect their stone hardware. By placing their primary beacons on this great circle, they created a self-sustaining energy circuit. The grid functioned as a planetary resonator, amplifying the Earth's natural electromagnetic pulse into a coherent signal that could be tracked from the outer solar system. To an incoming craft, this grid would appear as a glowing geometric web. The ley lines provided the track that guided their descent, ensuring that no matter where they entered the atmosphere, they could lock onto the primary equatorial corridor. This was essential for the logistics of a global occupation. The Anunnaki were managing resources across multiple continents: gold from Africa, copper from the Americas, and agricultural centers in Mesopotamia. They needed a standardized planetary-scale navigational system that operated independently of local landmarks or shifting weather patterns. The world map was their logistics network. Furthermore, we must address the nodes where these lines intersect. These locations, such as the Bermuda Triangle, or the Dragon's Triangle are often dismissed as areas of myth and mystery. However, within the context of the Anunnaki grid, these are the switching stations, areas of extreme magnetic flux where the energy of the ley lines converges. Historical records of disappearances and electronic fog in these zones are the modern echoes of an ancient high-power energy system that is still partially active. The hardware is still there, beneath the waves and buried under the sands, occasionally misfiring as the Earth's magnetic field fluctuates. We are not living on a planet of random civilizations. We are living in the ruins of a highly organized, planetary-scale facility. The geographical ley lines are the blueprints of that facility. As we move closer to the next orbital synchronization, the world map is becoming visible once more. The energy signatures along the Great Circle are increasing. The nodes are humming. The grid is preparing to receive the arrival of its architects. We have spent centuries walking along these ancient highways, unaware that they are the very roads the gods will use to return. The history of our planet is not a linear progression from primitive to advanced. It is a sequence of loops, closed cycles of construction followed by violent erasure. We have treated the ruins of the pre-diluvian world as static monuments to a dead past, but this is the ultimate cognitive failure. The invisible grid we have analysed across these 6 parts was never intended to be a museum for dead gods. It is a live circuit, a planetary-scale standby system waiting for its power source to return. We are now entering the final phase of the current 3,600-year orbital cycle. The SAR and the reset link between the ancient stone hardware and the celestial software is beginning to close. The return of the Anunnaki is not a religious event. It is a logistical inevitability driven by the mechanics of a highly eccentric orbit. As their homeworld approaches the inner solar system, its massive gravitational and electromagnetic wake begins to interact with the Earth's own magnetosphere. This is the quickening. In the Sumerian texts, this period is described as a time when the heavens tremble and the Earth shakes. Modern science calls this a geomagnetic excursion. We are currently witnessing the rapid weakening of Earth's magnetic shield, down over 15% in the last 2 centuries, and a dramatic acceleration in the movement of the magnetic North Pole. This is not a random geological fluke. It is the Earth's core reacting to the incoming pulse of the 3,600-year visitor. The megalithic grid was designed to manage this specific moment. As the magnetic field fluctuates, the piezoelectric properties of the granite and quartz within the temples begin to reactivate. The stone hardware is waking up to provide the stable navigational anchors required for the Anunnaki descent. Without this grid, the shifting crust of the Earth during an orbital flyby would make a controlled landing impossible. The temples are the stabilizers. They are the anchors that allow the architects to navigate the chaos of a planetary reset. The reset link is the moment when the terrestrial grid and the celestial beacons achieve a perfect telemetrical handshake. Why has this been hidden from the public consciousness? Because the reset implies a loss of control for our current global structures. If the grid is reactivating, it means the lease on this planet is about to expire. The increasing frequency of UAP sightings near high-energy magnetic nodes and ancient sites is not an alien invasion. It is a survey. The ground crew is checking the hardware. They are monitoring the ley lines, ensuring that the entry ports we discussed in Part 3 are clear and that the magnetic anomalies are functioning as intended. The gods aren't coming to save us. They are coming to reclaim their infrastructure. The ancient flight manuals are clear about what follows the reactivation of the grid. It is the Great Clearing, a period of atmospheric and lithospheric displacement that allows for the recalibration of the planet's resources. To the Anunnaki, The survival of the current human civilization is a secondary concern. We are the biological custodians who are tasked with keeping the grid alive, yet we have spent the last few millennia turning their technical stations into places of superstition. As the magnetic pulse intensifies, the cognitive void will begin to collapse. The truth will become a physical pressure, felt in the very marrow of our bones, as the stones begin to hum with the frequency of the returning architects. We are currently standing at the precipice of the seventh seal. The grid is online. The magnetic anomalies are surging. The ancient world map is glowing with an energy we cannot yet measure. We are the generation that will witness the reset link close. The countdown is no longer measured in centuries, but in the rapid decay of our own magnetic protection. The sky is preparing to receive the Shems once more, and the earth is vibrating in anticipation of its masters. The return is not a prophecy, it is a mathematical certainty. The descent into truth is not an ascent into light, it is a sobering fall into the cold technical reality of our species' origin. Throughout this journey, we have systematically dismantled the comforting illusions of modern archaeology. We have replaced the primitive sun worshipper with the terrestrial engineer and traded the divine miracle for orbital telemetry. The evidence left in the lithosphere of our planet is undeniable. The Great Pyramids, the ley lines, the magnetic nodes, and the Sumerian manuals are the fragmented components of a planetary-scale infrastructure. We are not the masters of this house. We are the biological custodians of a facility that was operational long before our history began. The cognitive void, the profound amnesia that grips the human race, was not a natural evolution. It was a strategic necessity. For the Anunnaki to maintain a functional ground crew across the vast 3,600-year gaps of their orbital cycle, they required a population that would preserve the hardware without understanding its true power. By cloaking technical protocols in the language of religion and ritual, they ensured that the invisible grid would survive through the rise and fall of countless human empires. We have spent millennia guarding the landing pads of our architects, mistaking their flight paths for the pathways of the soul. But the era of ignorance is closing. The reset link we discussed in Part 7 is no longer a theoretical threat. It is a physiological and geophysical reality. As the Earth's magnetic shield continues to fracture, the filter that has obscured our perception is thinning. The reactivation of the megalithic hardware is not a sign of our ascension, but a signal of their arrival. The Anunnaki do not return to save us from ourselves. They return to recalibrate their resource. To them, the shifting of the poles and the collapse of our digital civilization are merely the necessary great clearing required to reset the planetary operating system. We must now confront the ultimate counter-narrative, that we are a gap-filler species, a genetic bridge designed to maintain the Earth's geodetic precision during the long absences of its owners. Our modern obsession with reaching Mars and our recent advancements in artificial intelligence are perhaps not our own ideas, but the latent software of the Anunnaki finally reaching its execution phase as the orbital clock strikes zero. We are following a blueprint we never realized we held. The truth is that the countdown has already ended. The entry ports in Orion and Sirius are aligned. The magnetic anomalies are surging with the energy of the incoming pulse. The world map is glowing on sensors we are only beginning to understand. The architects are not coming from a place of myth. They are coming from a place of math. They are following the coordinates we have kept clear for them for over 10,000 years. As the sky begins to darken with the shadow of the 3,600-year visitor, and the ancient stones begin their final resonant hum, we are left with a single harrowing realization. We have looked at the stars for centuries, praying for a sign from the gods. We failed to realize that we were standing on the sign the entire time. The grid is active. The protocol is initiated. The descent is complete. Welcome back to History Before Dawn.